we'll start with a prayer by Isaac. Good job, Isaac. Way to go. All right, Silas, do you want to read a scripture? How about now? Oh, yeah. Now we're good. Okay. All right, say it again. Exodus.
Chapter 7. Verse
20.
20.
And then read right here. Start right there.
Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. He raised his staff in the presence of favor his officials and struck the water of the Nile, and all the water was changed into blood.
It was changed into blood. Very good. All right. Now, you know what you just read? So, God told Moses to take Aaron with him to Egypt, and this was when God sent Moses and Aaron to help free the Israelites from the Egypt and the Pharaoh. And this is part of all the miraculous things that God had him do. So God told him to wave his staff over the water of the Nile, and it would change to blood. And he did it, and he turned that Nile into blood, the river into blood, the water to blood. Isn't that pretty cool? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Rhett, you ready? All right, let's read Exodus 7, verse 10. So this is another thing that God was some miracles that God was working through Moses and Aaron to show that Pharaoh that God was God. So we say chapter 7, Exodus chapter 7, verse 10, and then read that.
We will be reading Exodus chapter 7, verse 10. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded Aaron, and threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake.
Oh, thank you. All right. So you comprehend what you just read? Do you know what you just read? No. Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, just like I was saying before. This was another thing that he did first, actually he did this first, but he threw his staff. You know what a staff is? Mm-hmm. Like a long walking stick. He threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And then Aaron picked the staff up again, and he picked the snake up, and it turned back into a staff after that. And he was doing all these as a vehicle through God to show Pharaoh that, hey, there's one God, and you better start paying attention and listening to us, or else things are going to get a lot worse. All right? Good job. Anybody else? Edmund, did you want to read a verse? All right. How about we read Exodus chapter 8, verses 16 through 18. Hey, let's sit down and be still. Let's have respect for who's up here. Exodus chapter 8.
We will be reading from Exodus chapter 8, 16 through 18.
There you go. Now let's find it. There you go. All right, stand up. You want us to fix this up?
Yeah.
There you go. 16 through 18, so you'll read all the way down to here.
Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust on the ground. And throughout the land of Egypt, the dust will become gnats. They did this, and when Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the ground, gnats came on the people and animals. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not.
So that's it. That's it. So what did you just read? You know what? Just summarize what happened.
Exodus.
Well, yeah, but can you summarize the story? Can you just tell me, just briefly, what you read?
That God made the dust into gnats, and only He could do it because the magicians could not do it.
Excellent. Very good. Exactly. All right. Anybody else want to do something? Did we get everybody? All right. Looks like you guys need to wind up or wind down a little bit. How about we get everybody up here? And this time, where's Leighton? He's not here. All the kids, everybody who wants to come up here, all the kids, we'll sing Roll the Gospel Chariot. We'll take one that we know this time. So that I know. You want to sing Roll the Gospel Chariot? All right, everybody. Come. Everybody get up here. All right, come on, Ben.
And stop.
Izzy, you want to come? All right. Are we ready? We're ready. Roll the gospel chariot along. Roll the gospel chariot along. Roll the gospel chariot along. And you won't behind. If sisters in the way, we'll start with the rock. If sisters in the way, we'll start with the rock. If sisters in the way, we'll start with the rock. If brothers in the way,
available. And now you're going to see 1/10 the energy available. Glad you're here, either tuned in the cyber world or just here. We got kind of a small crowd, but if you've been out driving on the road, you see that things are pretty foggy out there and visibility is not good. So whether people are here or wherever they are, we hope they're safe. Okay, you got a heartbeat? Yep. Everything's looking good. I'm glad there's energy somewhere. That makes me see a bright future as all that energy and eagerness and everything. We've been, yeah, you did good corralling the energy and pointing them out too. We've been looking at situations where people have gone through hard times in their life, and goodness, there's all kinds of hard times that you can go through. Job lost his health and his family, all kinds of things, all kind of reason for him to be depressed and question why. So we've been trying to think of other people that are going through hard times. We looked at Ruth, Naomi. Here lately we've been looking at Joseph. He went through quite a few things, and to cover the story of Joseph's life, it takes several chapters of Genesis. So I've been just trying to read the selected parts that will cover it. And the guy that I ride the swimming with, Ron Walcher, I asked him, can you think of any others a little bit like Joseph or Ruth and Naomi, people who have had some hard times and that the Bible spends some time? He said Jacob, that is later named Israel. And yeah, he had a hard time too. Help me out but I'm thinking that first off, his things got off to a bad start with him and his brother when he kind of, I guess, came up with his father's blessing in a way we might have thought was questionable. I guess this all according to God's plan, God's providence. And so he and his brother Esau were out of sorts for probably a long time, and then finally they got, later in life, they got to come back together. That's a nice thing. To me, one of the hard things in life that you can have trouble with is relationships. You can get out of sorts with somebody where you really got hard feelings, and sometimes those hard feelings can last a long time. Now, amongst Christians, we know that we try to clear the air and if we got out against each other, first off, don't sit around and tell everybody else, just go right to the person. And, if I've got out with him, I just talk to him. And then if I still don't feel like things are right between us and he hadn't come up to his part, then I guess I can take a witness or two. And anyway, I think you know the rest of the story about how Jesus said to handle relationships. I appreciate that tendency in the church. I've seen it over and over again. That I never hear about, in a gossipy way, because things are already worked out, and that's the way it ought to be. Simply, if we have ought against each other. And Jacob, of course, he and Esau, that wasn't immediate healing right away. I'm sure Esau was hacked off about the way this thing about the blessing of his father, and he probably, that festered for a long time. And finally, Jacob there was going to come a time when he could meet together. And then when they did, that meeting, to me, went so much better than what it might have. I think Jacob must have had all kinds of bad dreams, and I've been anxious about things, a relationship or things like that, where I don't know how somebody's going to take this thing, and I really fester over it for a day or two, and then turns out that a lot of times that it's just not that big a deal. Either they've already forgive and forget, which that's about as nice a way as for it to be. So that is one thing I always think about it. Jacob. The other thing is he worked a long time for the girl that he loved, and then he turned around, he got tricked and didn't get her. So that had to be a disappointment in his life. And the fact that it's disappointing when you think you've done a job, or according to the spec, or according to the agreement, how it should have been done, and then you find out there's more required, somebody, and usually you don't always have the control over it. So that's another thing I think of in Jacob's life that went difficult. But after that had happened, then things started going better for him. Where he got to kind of pick of how the flocks would get developed, and make some kind of an agreement with his uncle Laban, I believe it was, that if the flocks were spotted, or the goats were spotted, that he'd get a bunch of them, and then things started going pretty well for him, and wealth-wise. And so anyway, I can see where probably the stories of Jacob is every bit as relevant as what we're looking at, how God's providence ends up providing good out of a difficult or unwanted circumstance. But I was going to read a little bit for this for tonight's lesson. Now we'll go ahead and get back with Joseph. First off, Joseph, as we know, he was thrown into prison because he was accused of messing with Potiphar's wife, which he was not guilty of. But while he was in prison, he was able to, God's knack for him being able to interpret dreams and things. He interpreted some dreams, and later on his success at that got over to Pharaoh. And we probably remember how that story went, and then Pharaoh related his dreams about the sheaves, about the cattle, about the skinny cattle eating up the fat cattle, and I think the 12 skinny or poor stalks eating up the fat stock. But anyway, the fact that this is all going to forecast a famine, which Egypt ended up being the kind of the food source for that part of the world in those days. So Joseph was able to tell him about that and tell him what he ought to do. And I'm taking that Joseph, was probably as reliable a person. I take it he never lacked in self-confidence, or maybe not self-confidence, but then God confidence. The fact that some Pharaoh or somebody asked him to interpret a dream, he said, well, God has the answer to the interpretation of dreams. And so I think I want to start in the story of Joseph did recommend, and actually was the supervisor of the coming to the gathering of grain in Egypt. In other words, while the getting is good, to gather and have extra grain for these hard times that are coming. And chapter 42 in Genesis kind of talks about after that happened that Egypt has the abundance of food, and the rest of the world is kind of in need, and so they came to Egypt. And I'll just read a little bit, and we'll stop every now and then and discuss if maybe you have thoughts on it. Chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" That struck me as funny. I don't know. It sounds like something like a dad might tell his sons. "Why do you sit there looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die." That's pretty much telling it like it is. If they're that hungry and they were that close to, they could feel things coming on if they didn't do something about it pretty soon. Verse 3, then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Joseph did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain for the famine that was on the land of Canaan also. Okay, so which sons were not there to go make this grain deal? Joseph wasn't there, and Benjamin wasn't there. All the others, the names which I can't just rattle off, but and they're kind of strange names anyway. So, stop a minute. Anybody got any thoughts? Okay, verse 6. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the one who sold grain to all the people, to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. You suppose they recognized Joseph as their brother at that point? Okay.
He recognized them, but they didn't recognize him.
Okay. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, and he pretended to be a stranger and spoke heartily to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. Okay, I guess he's trying to set the stage to get them to start thinking through the recognition parts. It's not unlike a way a lawyer tries to present a case in court, throwing facts out there and everything. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized the brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You're spies." Okay, now I guess he's going to start messing with their minds a little bit. "You're spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them, "you've come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man, who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." What's that mean? One is no more. I figure he's dead or something? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess we can only get so deep into this honesty thing and the minds. Okay, 14. Unless there's other thoughts. Good. Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you'll not leave this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison, so that your words may be tested to see if you're telling the truth. If you're not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days.
So, he wants to see Benjamin, right?
He wants what?
Had Benjamin been born before they sold Joseph?
Yeah, Benjamin's born, and his mother died in his childbirth.
Okay, so Joseph knew Benjamin somehow.
Yeah, he must have known maybe before even that Jacob sent him out when he was dressed in that slick coat to check on his brothers. Okay, verse 18. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God." Okay, that's interesting. Joseph said to them, "Do this." I assume that means go give this message to your father, and I guess he also meant bring Benjamin here. If you're saying when he talks about do this, and that's interesting. For I fear God. Can you ever think of where that little phrase was said in other situations? Yeah, I'm thinking the story of Jonah was something I thought a phrase like that may have heard. But we don't have to dig them all out, but for I fear God, that's kind of that's a pretty profound statement. That first off probably means you believe it God exists, and that you fear Him. And Jesus said, "Fear the one that can kill the body and cast the soul into hell." So that fearing God, that's even if you don't know all the details about His nature, but that's still a pretty profound statement to say. So Joseph said that, I fear God. 19, if you're honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison while the rest of you take grain back to your starving households. Verse 20, but you must bring your youngest brother to me so that your words may be verified and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. Okay. Back a few verses ago, I wasn't sure if he was going to send all the brothers back there with the grain or not. At first, I thought he was just going to send one with the message. I'm not sure, but after 3 days, this other idea has culminated that he's going to send a number of the brothers to tote the grain so they'd have some food. Okay, verse 21, they said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us. Okay, that I didn't remember, a few chapters ago about that Joseph pleading for his life, but it doesn't surprise me that he might have, because when you're being thrown into a cistern, and I don't know how deep them cisterns are. I imagine it was so deep that you couldn't get out on your own. I remember when I was growing up, a lot of houses had cisterns. They catch the roof water and they put it into a cistern, and in some cases, a person, usually a child, get into a cistern and they couldn't get out. The things are just too deep. So and they would usually make them pretty deep, I think, so that the ground coolness would help cool the water. So
I wonder why it just kind of makes me curious why they thought that, we're being punished now for doing that. Like, there's been quite a while in the past Like, why did they put that together? Like, of all the things they might have done, they're like, well, this is because we did that.
Some questions wouldn't say the answer, but I would think that if they did that and he pleaded for his life and everything, that's a pretty dramatic scene, and I would have a hard time getting that out of my mind through the years. I mean, my brother pleading for his life, that even though they were maybe not always full blood, they all shared their father's DNA, and they had different mothers, some of them. So
Maybe it got them to thinking about it more recently, because when they had said previously, the youngest is now with our father and the one is no more. Maybe when they're talking about that, it sparked it.
yeah, they know it.
I think their conscience bothered them because they saw how sad it made Jacob, which was another thing that Jacob had to endure. But Google says it was 13 years, and you know it's got to be right.
Enough said. Okay.
Joseph was 17 when they put him in the prison and didn't come off. 17.
Yeah, he was 30 when he got put in charge of all this big deal, checking the grain.
They may not have recognized him because if you've ever watched the movies with Joseph, they always have him with the Egyptian makeup and this crown thing of a snake on his head. I mean, he may have dressed like the Egyptians, so they didn't end with that.
Yeah, a lot of the movies I remember seeing, Egyptians, they're portrayed as people with kind of bald heads. Makes you feel important, doesn't it, Don?
In children's workbooks, when I was teaching a class, it had him with like a shaved head around, and then the hair, that little bit of hair up top. Like, I don't know.
I'm getting there too. Okay. This is kind of fun. I find it fun to read the scripture because I see things often, and I usually build a picture, right or wrong, of what this must have looked like and how people must have thought and felt. And again, it's hard to, and about all you got to do to build those thoughts is either what the words say or how you would have felt if you were him or her. So anyway, let's see where my finger was. I think I was going to read verse 22. Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them. Guess they figured he just spoke Egyptian or something like that. Since he was using an interpreter. Okay, that kind of faked him out, I guess, maybe. Okay, verse 24, he turned away from them and began to weep. Then he turned back and spoke to them again. Guess he maybe dried the tears a little bit to keep a straight face or something. Spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they had stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of the sack. Verse 28, "My silver has been returned," he said to the brothers. "Here it is in my sack." And their hearts sank. Kind of like, oh no. And they turned to each other with trembling and said, "What is this thing that God has done to us?" That's an interesting statement. What is this thing God has done to us? So I wonder who put the silver in the sacks. I don't know. Well, I guess it's all God's providence or something. Anyway, that's what they had. Thoughts at this point? Okay, verse 29. When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, "The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us, and he treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan." When the man who is Lord over the land said to us, "This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land." Okay, stop that. When he said trade in the land, I guess he means trade in the land of Egypt, where there is stuff, because everywhere else there must have been famine and not much to be doing trading. Okay, verse 35. As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. And when they and their fathers saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." That's how Jacob felt. 37. Then Reuben said to his father, "You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back." Okay, those words still must have been pretty hard to swallow by the dad, Jacob. Verse 38. But Jacob said, "My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead. He is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray-haired head down to the grave in sorrow." That's also how Jacob felt. Thoughts so far? He was. And probably had, at least from what you can tell, he had pretty good sense about him. Yeah, but you did. What you got is not 12, maybe close brothers. You got 12 of different concubines and mothers and stuff like that. I can see where they may not have been perfectly close. As when I first read Genesis, I would have thought that, Joseph's going to have some important point in the line going up to Christ and everything. It surprised me a little bit when it kind of switched to Judah, but that's okay. There are a few surprising things that kind of happen in the scriptures. That's why it's always interesting to keep reading, and I guess that's why I always find things that come about that I didn't expect. So the second journey to Egypt, they first I think they took I'm going to try to paraphrase a few things. I think they took the silver back. I'm not sure when they presented the silver, or sort of kept it quiet and just brought it back there. I was going to skip a few chapters, I think.
I love the father and son conversation in verse 43, verse 6.
Which chapter?
And 43.
Okay.
The last life you bring this trouble on me by telling the man you had another brother. You just think it was son. Well, they said the main question is closely about ourselves and our family. Is your father still living? He asked. Do you have another brother? We just answered those questions. How are we to know? He'd say, bring your brother down here.
Yeah, it's like you're being quizzed by somebody that already knows the answers. That's kind of how Jesus was in a lot of cases. Yeah. Anyway, I guess some of these, excuse me, when Joseph finally made himself known to the brothers and everything, I guess that was the stressful letdown in his life. I mean, all this time he was kind of keeping things bottled up. I don't know if he was wanting his brothers to sort of confess and say that he's all. That's probably one thing I could imagine that he'd want. You done me wrong, and sooner or later, when are you going to fess up and tell them all this thing? But anyway, when it finally, they didn't seem to be getting it, and finally Joseph said, "It's me, Joseph, your brother, and you meant harm to me, but God's providence meant good," and that was important. And he had to feel strongly about it because of the tears, the things that he said. So, and here was Joseph was, financially he was on top of the world. He was the boss man of all the grain in Egypt, and just a guy. So, I guess that some other thoughts about Joseph's life, things that he went through. That confrontation, kind of the culmination of it, ending when he finally expressed who he was to his brothers, that did the ultimate thing of this, so they could kind of see not only that they'd done wrong, and now he had the strength and all the influence, but also that this is God's plan.
It seems also Joseph was young. He was 17 when his brothers took him, and then later there was life. So his concept of God, right or wrong, was grounded in him in those early years. And being away from that, he still knew what God's plan was. I think that our children today, and I know they did a lot of things by clothes, over and over. How important it is for us to give our children that information while they're young. So when they grow up, we pray that they memorize. And Joseph did, and had lots of that.
Is that kind of an important lesson to teach our kids that, things look pretty dim at this situation and everything, but maybe God's got something in mind. We don't see it yet. That's one way to look at all this, and that's probably one of the best lessons, or the best ways we can approach times, especially when we're in a hardship. Like, I don't know if when Joseph was 17 and he was thrown in that cistern, whether he had all this insight, thinking, I would think he had this anxieties that you'd figure on for being thrown there and left for dead or something like that. But the one thing that God gave him was the ability to interpret dreams and things. So I don't know if that gave him much extra insight to help see the providence of God is in charge here. Maybe I don't see the way it's going to play out completely, but I don't know if Joseph had that or whether it's kind of developed, but then he expressed it there when finally he told his brothers about how things were and who's in charge, and things like that.
One more comment. It seems like, when he told the baker and the cupbearer that interpretation belonged to God, but then when he was younger and he had his dreams, he could interpret it. Joseph didn't say, this is what I saw, so you kind of know what's happening from his parents saying, you mean we're going to bow down to you? So we still have, to me, some great insight.
Okay, yeah, I never thought about that. Okay, well, that's everything that I'd kind of thought about as far as Joseph's, and thought, any other things may come out. Can you think of any other people who, they're learned from, or they experience these kinds of difficulties? We've talked 2 or 3 good examples. Can you think of any others that? Yeah, although you don't see Joseph's thoughts and motives and being very righteous. When he'd rather this bunch of people in Nineveh just die for their wickedness and sin and everything, and that's not God. That wasn't God's plan. But Jonah didn't seem to get that very well. In fact, God was still, towards the end of the book of Jonah, still explaining to Jonah, you'd have all these people die and be destroyed because of their wickedness, and yet you had all this. You had these tender feelings for this little plant or something like that. So yeah, that's one way to see in Jonah. Jonah's my oldest daughter's favorite story. She used to, whenever I'd go in, I'd tell her a story. Well, Jonah would be the one. And so I should know that better. It's just that she's about 50 now, and I didn't repeat it over and over. What is I'm trying to we're gonna kind of be going on something next week. If you don't tell me a person in particular that we're not, then I'm gonna have a potpourri of what different people went through in their life, and there's plenty of information on that in the scriptures too. Gonna try to aim more towards the New Testament. We talked about Old Testament characters, and that's fine. There's a lot to learn from them. But if no one's got any particular person, then we'll kind of look at a bunch of different people and see what we can learn about the trials they went through, as well as God's providence of how He provided us. Yeah. One thing for sure is the providence of salvation. We look at all the things that's happened since the days that God created mankind, and then mankind went bad. There was a time when God regretted He even made man, and yet there was talks about Abraham, and Abraham wasn't always a perfectly admirable sort of person, and yet he was admired by the Hebrew nation. So God's providence is evident throughout the Scripture. The New Testament, to me, moves a little faster in some ways, but there's some exciting things. Landon, I think I'm done broadcasting.